Good evening, everyone. I'm Teresa Query with the Family Focus Research Center, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. Tonight's presentation is Special Education and Virtual Learning, and is presented by Dina, Kaplan, and Sophia Bliziotis with Vanaman German, LLP, and it's hosted by Family Focus Research Center. Family Focus Research Center is an agency that serves families in the San Fernando, Santa Clarita Valley, and Antelope Valley, and that are clients of the North LA County Regional Center. Hopefully, when you register for the event on our website, you also checked out different support groups and upcoming events that we're hosting. I've also put our information in the chat box. And with that, I just want to do a little housekeeping. We will have question and answers at the end of the presentation. So put them in the chat box and we will definitely try to get around to as many of your questions and provide answers. So with that, I am going to, oh, and one other thing, this is being recorded. I want to make sure it's being recorded. Yes, it is. And the presentation will be on our website as well as Vanaman's website along with the PowerPoint. Just give us a few days. Hopefully by the weekend, we will have that uploaded. I will also put my information in the chat box, teresa.query@csun.edu. But you will need to go to our website to get the recording. So with that, I will turn it over to our professionals and we will get going. Thank you. Dina?
Thank you, Teresa. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dina Kaplan, and with me is Sophia Bliziotis. We are both attorneys with, it's now Vanaman German, LLP. It used to be Newman Aronson Vanaman, LLP. We've just had a name change, but we're still the great firm that we've always been. And I see we have we have attorneys, we have some parents, we have some psychologists, so we have a good group of people. Please make sure that if you have a question specific to whatever we're talking about, to definitely put it in the chat. In a few minutes, I'm going to share the screen, and so you'll have my PowerPoint, and like Teresa said, it'll be available on both of our websites, and I have that information in the PowerPoint. And I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 40 years. I'm also the parent of a special needs son who just turned 27 and who has multiple physical, developmental, and mental health challenges. I'm also a grandparent. I have 5 grandkids, 2 of whom, it turns out, are high functioning autistic. So I'm helping my daughters with them as well. So it's fun to see my daughters parent their children. Anyway, welcome everybody. Sophia's going to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sophia Bliziotis, and I'm fortunate enough to work with Dina and everyone else at Vanaman German. I was licensed 23 years ago and didn't practice law initially, and did for a little bit and thought I'd better find something I love. Otherwise, I'm not going to do this. And so my interest, my social justice interests led me to the civil rights aspect of disabilities law. And here we are.
Thank you, Sophia. All right, I'm going to now share the screen. So we will be in the upper corner, I think. So hang on a second here. Let me click on that. And hold on. I'm new at this in terms of sharing the screen. So this is just obviously who we are and what we're speaking about. One big caveat, we have been getting information every minute of every hour of every day, and we all have whiplash because this is what's been going on. I mean, every time I did a slide, 5 minutes later, I had to change it. So the information we have on our slides is up to the minute as of today and as of this minute. But like I said, everything is changing so rapidly. It is really hard to get to make sure we have everything up to date. So with that, I will tell you, please check our website and the Family Focus Resource Center websites regularly so that you will get updated information, and the web addresses are there.
Can I just say one question?
Yes.
One little thing there on the Family Focus, it's actually Resource Center. So where there's the resources, the C should be an S.
I'm sorry about that. I obviously didn't proofread it. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I will fix it before we post it.
Because I'm not sure where a recourse will go, but I'm sure to get somewhere.
Sorry about that. Okay, great. All right. So we're all pretty COVID weary. Just a little background. In December, Congress approved this $900 billion COVID relief package with almost $82 billion for education. And that education money contained $54 billion for K-12 education, which many of the advocacy groups and educators have said is far short of 2.2 trillion that they say are necessary to educate our kids given this COVID situation. So California either will or has received 6.7 billion of the COVID relief money, with 6 billion being sent to local governments. And just so you know, President Biden requested an additional 175 billion to get schools reopened. So the big question of the day is, when will schools reopen? Now, some have, and as we all know, many of you are in LA Unified and they have not yet opened. So in December was when Governor Newsom announced his Safe Schools plan to find a way to use the federal money to address the educational needs. So really exciting news is that Dr. Barbara Ferrer from LA County Department of Public Health, and I don't know if you know who she is, but I get her emails every day and I'm always anxious to see her statistics. Yesterday, she announced that LA County's incidence of COVID the rate has been under 25 cases per 100,000 people for 5 consecutive days, which means schools in LA County are now eligible to reopen for grades, actually TK to 6. So only elementary school, provided they're in compliance with federal regulations, state regulations, and county directives. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But and Sophia is going to talk about the federal CDC guidelines, the Centers for Disease Control, which basically has the same guidelines that the county does in terms of getting schools reopened. So masking and social distancing, infection control, frequent hand washing and sanitizing, small cohorts of students without mixing, and they must have a safety plan, a COVID safety plan in place, ensure good ventilation, and have a testing plan. So these are things that, from what I understand in the news today, that LA Unified has done all of these things except for reopening. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to turn the slide over to Sophia to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Dina. Dina went over what the safety protocols are, and CDC has said that it's safe to reopen schools. The safety protocols that Dina just mentioned have to be in place. I won't repeat them. You can see them on the slide. And the CDC has said that teacher vaccination is important, but it's not necessary for schools to safely reopen. But LAUSD and UTLA, the teachers union, have said not so fast. And LAUSD's reopening remains uncertain, regardless of what we're hearing from Barbara Ferrer and the CDC. I don't know if any of you saw Superintendent Buettner and his presentation, and what he said was, the safety protocols have to be there. check. LAUSD has done that. And that the overall COVID numbers have to be down. I almost want to say check, but I can't quite, because what's happened is what Buettner has said in subsequent articles where he's been quoted has been, sure, LA County's numbers are down and in the safe range, but that doesn't, if you're looking at, and he uses this example, La Cañada, where they have very few cases versus pockets of LA where it's almost 6 times the number as La Cañada. So he's saying that there are other people who have cautioned and said to slow down the reopening. He also said that it's necessary for vaccinations for teachers to open. And it contradicts the CDC advice. It also contradicts the Southern California chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they're citing experts that say to slow it down. I don't know if any of you heard, Buettner saying that the politicians are using this as political leverage and saying just do it, like the Nike ad or Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz.
Sophia, can I jump in for 1 second? I just want to let everybody know that the CDC guidelines are now available on the VanamanGerman.com website under resources. So you can take a look at those if you want more detail.
Yeah, that's great, actually. And there's a lot of reporting because there's a lot of inequity in distance learning. So everyone wants to know when they're going to reopen, as Dina said. And LAUSD, we'd like to be able to tell you, but they remain uncertain. We don't know what's going to actually happen. Now, what's interesting about schools reopening is there's a large group of parents who want it to reopen because they're tired of being enforcers and they're tired of trying to teach their children, etc. But there's another group of parents who are really scared to send their child who's not vaccinated back to school, afraid that they're going to bring it back to the home, and they're afraid of the MIS-C, the multi-inflammatory syndrome in children. So, it's like this in terms of who wants to actually reopen schools. The majority saying yes. That's what we're hearing. And, what we can tell you is that each school district has to have their safety protocols in place. And they have to comply with the CDC guidelines. Dina, I want to ask if you can think of a more definitive way to put this.
Yeah, I don't have a magic wand, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I do know that, with the smaller districts, we're really starting to reopen. So I know some in Ventura County have been open and have stayed open, and they've made it work. And the incidence of COVID has been relatively low. I know some of the schools.
Glendale has some of the cohorts.
I know some of the schools in the Santa Clarita Valley and Palmdale area have also had small cohorts, and every district seems to be doing things a little bit differently, whether they do it with shortened hours for different groups, or kids come in person every other day. So they have made it work. And actually, before the second surge happened and the second shutdown in December, LA Unified had started to do in-person assessments again with the safety protocols in place. There weren't a lot of assessors, though, that were available. And if you were lucky enough to get an assessment, you oftentimes would have to drive pretty far to get that assessment done. So what we do know is that once in-person assessments and in-person schooling resume, there's going to be a lot of assessments that need to take place by the districts. So
we received word from some of the independent assessors that they got the go-ahead to start those assessments. And, you know, it feels like a push and pull. I mean, one of the questions that we get a lot is, why isn't LAUSD reopening? And it's all of what we've been saying, but it's also has to do with the size of LAUSD and the ability to monitor and to have the oversight, which is easier to do in smaller districts as a practical matter. I'm not defending LAUSD, and we're going to be getting into the mental health issues as a result of the shutdown and, you know, the push and pull of who's to blame. But it's important to realize that these are some of the factors that play into it, the biggest one being the size of LAUSD.
Right. I noticed that Dr. Sandra Kaler's attending our webinar. If she's still here, hello. She has been doing in-person assessments, and thankfully independent in-person assessments, and some of the other assessors that we work with have been doing them. But the observation piece has been difficult because specifically in LA Unified, they have taken the position that observation of virtual class is not, it's not appropriate for assessments. However, you know, it is what it is. They're supposed to be observing the current educational placement, and the current educational placement is virtual learning. So there are a multitude of issues that have popped up in ways that we never imagined. So we are learning as we go. Anyway, Sophia, you want the next slide?
Sure. I did want to just say this about the assessors. Many are doing them with protective equipment in place, but an equal number that, you know, I've reached out to have said, no, not until I've had the double vaccination. So it is personal choice. Just wanted to say that.
Okay.
All right. So, you know, there was a question that popped up in the chat that went across my screen that said, why won't LAUSD do the right thing without due process? Well, you know, I would love to be able to answer that question. I can't, but what I can tell you is that all of us know that they're not doing the right thing, whatever the right thing may be, whether it's parent choice, a hybrid program, whatever that may be. And as a result, the Department of Education and the Office for Civil Rights is investigating LAUSD and other school districts, you know, for a failure to provide a free and appropriate public education during the pandemic. You know, it's important to note that they're investigating for possible discrimination, but an investigation is not the same as finding them guilty of it. It's encouraging that they're investigating. It's almost unimaginable for those of us who sit on this side to imagine that they won't find violations and discrimination. And part of it is that the Education Department and the California, I forget the name of the Assembly bill, I think it was 98, it comes later in the slides, said that students with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate public education during distance learning. And you know, the parents that we speak to are saying it's not working. Either they're seeing, it's interesting. And as being the enforcer and the teacher, they're seeing low expectations for the learning. They're seeing it up close and personal in a way that they ordinarily wouldn't. And they're seeing regression. And they're seeing a lot of regression, actually, is what we're hearing. And they're seeing services not being delivered and things in the IEP being unilaterally changed. And that's why there's an investigation going on. Enough parents were reporting and lobbying for their child's rights. So we'll see what happens, what the outcome of that is.
Do you want me to address compensatory ed?
Well, you're going to in that other slide. I did want to say that there will be claims for compensatory education to make up for the learning loss. And then I think one of the most important things that parents can do, and I'm going to slip this in here, although you're going to be talking about compensatory education versus recoupment next, is the need for logging. It's putting one more thing on your to-do list, and we're loath to do that. But we have a template on our website, even something like this, 99 cents. You have to log what's going on, that your child disengaged after 15 minutes. They stayed engaged for 15, walked away, refused for 30. And you just date it. And it's a contemporaneous recording. So it potentially could become evidence. And it's a useful tool. It also gives you the kind of granular detail when you do go forward asking for a way to help right the wrong, if you will, or make up for it. But Dina, you were going to talk about compensatory education versus recoupment, because
Right.
LAUSD is using that language.
I think before I move to that slide, I think something that's really important is the fact that parents are actually seeing what's happening in their students' classroom because they are in the home watching their child participate in class, whereas the teachers are not necessarily seeing what's going on behind the screen. So it's extremely important to make sure that you document everything that's going on. Now, I say the word document, and Sophia held up a notebook, and we're kind of old school where we write things down. But here's what I also say: dictate into your telephone, find an app that works for you. If you're chasing your child around, say, I'm chasing my child around today because he didn't access whatever class it was. And you can put the date, and you'll have the evidence that we need to move forward with due process in order to get compensated, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, but in order to make up for the regression and the educational loss that our students are suffering right now. So I've seen this coming from LA Unified, but it's also been the actual beginning of it came from another state and a publication that is for educators across the country. What they're saying is compensatory services as they're provided in as it's defined in the IDEA, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Compensatory services are available when a school district has failed to provide a free, appropriate public education for a student, our FAPE. And it implies that the district did something wrong, and that's why you file for due process to get compensatory services. And like I said, compensatory services may be available if a district failed to provide educational and support during services during COVID when they could have reasonably done so. In other words, not necessarily the quality of the service, but if they failed to provide the service at all, which happened in the very beginning of the shutdown when we were all sort of scrambling to figure things out. I think now the services are being provided. The problem being that our students are not benefiting from them or not accessing them in the ways that they were when they were in the school setting. So what we're seeing now is districts are talking about recoupment services instead of compensatory services because they don't want to be blamed for the pandemic, which, you know, we understand it's out of our control. It happened. So if you hear that term recoupment services, we're still sort of analyzing this, but I think it's something that we can ask for in due process as a compensatory remedy to make up for what the student has lost and the learning that they have learning loss that they suffered during the shutdown. So when you go to an IEP for your child, I think it's important that you talk about regression and what you have to show that that regression, which is, like I said, and like Sophia said, keeping track of everything that has been going on while your child has been accessing or trying to access the programs that the school is providing. Also look at, prior IEP history, prior data, and any private assessments that you've gotten since COVID shut down. But I think ultimately what's going to be really important is the evidence that you supply to the IEP team and that we can then use in due process to show that a child has regressed. And so that's where we are with that. I think you're going to start hearing more about compensatory versus recoupment services. And we just got this information, so we're sort of just analyzing it. But the other thing I'm going to tell you is check our website, because and also sign up for our newsletter, because we do a newsletter once a month with the up-to-date information. So, okay, Sophia.
There were some questions in the chat about the mental health issues. What about the mental health of students who are only having distance learning? And we all know that distance learning is not a form of instruction. It's a form of instruction. It's not school. So, I'm going to start with the lawsuit you may have heard about in San Francisco, because San Francisco's lawsuit, the city of San Francisco suing the school district, was motivated by the fact that the mental health crisis as a result of the distance learning. And they were citing the increase in anxiety, depression, eating disorders as a result of distance learning, and seeing the uptick. So
there's also been an increase in suicide attempts.
A lot of suicide attempts. And I think I'm just reading something that I had pulled out, which was the University of California, San Francisco Children's Emergency Department at Mission Bay reported record high numbers of suicidal children seen and treated. So that was the motivation for that. And there's a city councilman here whose last name I will butcher, so I won't try it, who wanted to file a lawsuit, and Superintendent Buettner called it a political stunt. And I think that that's a facile response to someone trying to represent the interests of parents who have children who are really suffering with distance learning, mental health deterioration right before their eyes. So, many of us have been tried. Vanaman German, in conjunction with the Alliance for Children's Rights and Learning Rights Center, and Alexis Casillas in Millbank, joined forces. We filed a writ collectively in the California Supreme Court. California Supremes refused to hear it. There was a request for an immediate injunctive relief to open up the schools with small cohort in-person instruction, and the California Supremes just denied it without an explanation. It was also to resume in-person assessments and IEP services, and for NPAs and NPSs to do it in person. But they didn't hear the case, and they denied the relief requested. So we've heard about the San Francisco lawsuit. There was another, well, I'll talk about that later. They said that it was a lawsuit, but in fact it wasn't. It just wasn't. Anyway, we'll get there. So Orange County sued also. And, this is where we are. Schools in LAUSD have to apply for a waiver to reopen, and a lot of schools are not doing that. But here we are, actually. It wasn't so far in the future. The more things change, the more they stay the same. There was another lawsuit touted as a big lawsuit, but really the settlement agreement was just an affirmation of Senate Bill 98, where 98 provided that special education, distance learning had to include special education related services and any other services required by the IEP. And all that was required from the settlement agreement was that Governor Newsom make a public announcement affirming Senate Bill 98, which he did. So it wasn't any great shakes in terms of having an impact. I mean, I just have to say that. So, all right.
Can I jump in here for a second? I think
Please.
the thing that's important to reiterate is that during this time period, so the federal law remained in effect for a short period of time. California was given a pass in terms of doing assessments, but then that was no longer in effect. So, and I think that was overturned or ended in July. And
right, so, July 1st, it ended.
Right. So basically, all districts are bound by the federal and state laws regarding special education, and nothing's changed with regard to that. So while I understand that trying to provide students with distance learning has numerous challenges, I also think that it's going to be really, gosh, I keep saying this, I can't tell you enough. It's really important for us because, let me back up a second, because I'm a parent, and they used to always tell me, you're not the expert about your child. And I used to say to them, I am the expert about my child. But in this case, you guys are going to be the experts about your children, because you're going to know exactly what was going on while they were attempting to access their education. And I've heard all kinds of stories from my clients where parents have chased their children around with the iPad to try to get them to pay attention to the class, or have given them candy to make them sit there and, whatever works. Or I have one client whose child will sit for 5 seconds and then he runs out and climbs on the furniture and they have to chase after him. I have another client whose one child got a chronic illness and the other child's got major behaviors. So the mom is home with both of them trying to deal with both things at the same time. I have families who the parents have had to quit work. I mean, this has been a huge, huge problem for all of us. And one thing that Teresa and Sophia and I were talking about right before we started this webinar is it's kind of like that old adage, you've got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. Parents need to give themselves a break. You need to do whatever it is that you do to help yourself stay calm or calm down. I said that I don't need Xanax because I have chocolate, and that's my favorite thing. But I mean, everybody has their favorite thing to help them deal with stress. And we can't stress that enough, that you need to take care of yourselves. So
to that point, I mean, most of you probably know that regional center under the auspices of DDS, has authorized, it's going by different names, but I know it as conversion respite, for the parents who are at home and have to work from home and can't work from home because they are acting as teacher, enforcer, behavioral aid, speech and language pathologist, OTs. That typically regional center doesn't step in during the school days, but there is this exception being made during this time, and it's called conversion respite for some regional centers, where someone, is sent in during the school hours on top of the other services. So
That's also called attendant care that we've been
yes,
seeing.
the
Yeah.
PA care, right?
Personal attendant, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if your client has regional center services, you can ask for additional support.
During this
Definitely,
time.
good point.
So, another thing that has happened, and this is LAUSD specific, is, and it's why it's so important for parents to add yet another thing to their to-do list and to lobby your board district, your district board member. With the new board president, Gomez, I think is her last name, she's shut down all committees. And when Scott, God, I'm going to butcher his name, Schmerlison, asked to resume the special ed committee, she said no, during COVID, no committees. And he volunteered to do all the work for it. So, that's where LAUSD is. And what we ask you to do is to call or write your board district member and ask them to reactivate the Parent Engagement and Special Education Committee.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. All right, who's to blame? No, we've talked about this a little bit before, obviously, and I just want to reiterate, the number one answer, of course, is COVID-19 is to blame, and our lives have all been dramatically changed and in ways that we don't even know about yet because of this pandemic. And I know so many families who have lost loved ones because of it, and it's extremely frightening. So I hope everybody's doing what they can to stay safe and healthy. And then the second answer is it really depends on who you ask. Now we're talking a lot about LA Unified, and I know that there are several people on this webinar that are from other districts. What we found is that, and Sophia touched on it, smaller districts have a much easier time of managing the smaller cohorts and the hybrid learning situation, having kids come certain days or certain hours or morning and afternoon, and being able to do the disinfecting that they have to do in between, keeping kids separate from other smaller cohorts seems to be much easier in smaller districts, which is why we've seen more districts back in session. Like I was saying, there's the ones in the Antelope Valley, some in Santa Clarita. Ventura County has been in sessions for quite a while. So LA Unified tends to point the fingers at the teachers union, and I totally understand teachers want to be completely vaccinated before they go back to school, and I get that. So Buettner is supporting that. And so we sort of been guessing and trying to figure out when school might reopen for LA Unified. And our best guess is probably in August for the next school year. I don't think we're going to see anything happen quickly enough to reopen for this school year. I'm hopeful that the assessments will start to be done, and possibly some small cohorts of special education might be back in session, but we are really not sure about that. So it really depends on all the competing factions coming to terms. And what I do know is that LA Unified, according to what they have said is that their schools are ready. They've been disinfected. They have the right ventilation. They're ready to go. So we're hopeful that once everybody gets vaccinated, then schools will reopen. And so I did want to touch on vaccines. So that's going to be here. I first want to say I'm so happy that our lobbying has paid off. Disability Voices United, I don't know if anybody on our webinar is a member, they led the charge, and other community groups and all of the parents, myself included, who contacted the governor. We won, being that our children with special needs might be eligible for vaccines on March 15th, beginning March 15th. And there's a list of who is eligible in terms of what special needs will be eligible. But children that have a health risk or a disability that puts them at a high risk of COVID infection and death, they will be able to be vaccinated. I have been telling my clients that you should contact your child's pediatrician and get a letter from the pediatrician. We don't know yet what's going to happen in terms of, I haven't heard anything about making appointments yet for our kids, but and I'm sure many of the parents on here are their children's IHSS providers. And as an IHSS provider, you were able to, if you don't know that, you are able to now currently get the vaccine. And all you need is a pay stub from IHSS. The thing that was driving me crazy was that I'm over 65 and I'm my son's IHSS worker, so I could get vaccinated. My husband could get vaccinated, but our son, who's got multiple disabilities and healthcare needs and a compromised immune system, couldn't get vaccinated. So I'm very happy that as of March 15th, many of our children will be able to be vaccinated. The other thing,
I'm sorry.
What? Go ahead.
No, they, it was interesting because the guidelines actually pulled out specifically those with Down syndrome, and then grouped everyone else into a separate group of disabilities. And I just want to reinforce what you said, Dina, because our reading of it is the part that is highlighted is who would be difficult to treat because of their disability if they contracted COVID-19. And that's where the doctor's note comes in. If your doctor is willing to specifically say there would be issues being able to treat so-and-so because of their disability, it would be super helpful.
That's really important, especially for those of us who have children who are nonverbal, like myself,
Yes.
who cannot speak for, my son cannot speak for himself, and he gets aggressive when he's not feeling well. And we've had horrible hospitalizations when he has been sick. So I think that's a big deal. And hopefully your pediatricians can support that. I don't know if regional centers are going to be doing letters like they did for us as parents of children with special needs, but I have not heard yet. If anybody knows, I'll be happy to hear that. And when I do find out, I will be sure to make sure it's on our website. The other thing,
they will.
They will?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. So yeah, contact your regional center caseworker and tell them that you need a letter so that your child can be vaccinated. I would tell you get both, a letter from your caseworker and your doctor, your child's doctor, because they might scrutinize it. If you look at what they wrote, they've been very, very specific about who is going to be eligible, and it's going to be eligible as of March 15th. For ages 16 to 64, and they've listed several different diseases, current cancer with a debilitated immunocompromised state, things that have compromised your immune system, and people with developmental or severe disabilities that would be prevented from ongoing care if they contracted it, COVID-19. So I think it's important to look closely at what they're stating in terms of who is eligible, and make sure that your doctor, your child's doctor, gets it right when they write the letter.
And we can't forget, though, that there is still a shortage of vaccinations.
Yep, there's still a shortage of vaccines. And that was another thing I was going to tell you, that as of March 1st, all teachers and related workers are going to be eligible for vaccine. And LA Unified specifically is opening up a huge site in conjunction with the Rams at SoFi Center to do, like thousands of vaccines a day, to try to get as many teachers and district workers vaccinated as possible in the shortest period of time. However, they're going to be all ready to go. People are being trained. Other organizations are teaching people how to give the vaccines. All we need are vaccines. So hopefully, President Biden has gotten our companies that are making these vaccines to make as many as they possibly can and get it out to us, because for some reason California didn't get as many as we had hoped. So hopefully everybody will be vaccinated as soon as possible. I will tell you, I did get my first dose. I haven't gotten the second dose yet, and I've heard I'm getting it on Saturday. I've heard all kinds of stories, so I'm hopeful there's no side effects, but I will feel a lot better taking care of my child when I'm fully vaccinated. So anyway, that's all we have with regard to slides tonight, and we are very happy to answer all kinds of questions.